everyone, and welcome to our live talk about mental health in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month. My name is Sari El Kabi, and I'll be the moderator of this event. First, I would like to say that mental health is an important topic that affects all of us. It's something that we all need to pay attention to, whether we're struggling with our own mental health or supporting someone else who is. Unfortunately, there are many stigmas and misunderstandings surrounding mental health, and that's why events like this are so important. So today we're here to raise awareness and provide insights and practical advice on how to take care of our mental well-being. I hope that by the end of this talk, you will feel more informed and inspired to take care of your own mental health or to support others who may be struggling. Now, let's get started. And we're lucky to have with us a panel of experts who will be sharing their knowledge and experiences on this important topic. So let's get started with introducing them. Our first speaker is Dr. Diksha, educational psychologist and advocate for promoting the voices of children and young people of determination of their families. Dr. Diksha, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your connection to mental health?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sally, for the wonderful introduction. And I'm so glad to be here this evening. So, as introduced, I'm an educational psychologist, Dubai born and brought up. So, this is home for me. UK qualified and started working a couple of years ago in the very, very complex mental health and inclusion sector in the UAE. I think it's a very, very interesting time, especially during COVID and post-COVID, to be thinking about mental health. I primarily work with children, young people, and their families, and look at the interplay between disability, difficulties, and mental health. So, yeah.
Thank you. And now to our second speaker, Dr. Nahida, an American board certified consultant psychiatrist. She is also a clinical lead on Abu Dhabi's mental health strategy, owned by the Department of Health, Abu Dhabi. So, Dr. Nahida, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your connection to mental health?
Thank you, Sally, and it's a real joy and pleasure to be among these panel of experts here. It's a beautiful initiative that you're doing to raise awareness. As you mentioned, I'm a consultant psychiatrist, so I'm a provider by practice and experience. I see patients on a day-to-day basis, but also have been privileged to work on the regulator sector with Department of Health, so which is where I get in contact with the public policies and the awareness requirements and the need for reforms in mental health that would eventually trickle down to how my patients would be perceived in the community. So for me, platforms like this, dialogues like this are very, very important, because at the end of the rope are people who really need that awareness and that support. So thank you again, and it's a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And now to our third speaker, Sadaf, an international author, a mental health activist. She shared invaluable insights, tools, and techniques on self-management in her book, Flip. Sadaf, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your connection to mental health?
Sure. Thank you so much, Team Ray, Sally, especially for coordinating it, bringing us all together. I've been a business faculty and corporate trainer by profession, and mental health, when I got more aware about it, I immediately started working on my own self. And then it led me to being more present, write a book, be out there helping other people. I'm a certified coach, NLP, and EQ practitioner. So these are the tools that kind of bring together, and we work with people to make them more aware of their surroundings, how they can perform better when they're in companies, in groups. It's been an amazing journey so far, and I am super excited to tell and share all the secrets that I've learned on this journey.
We're excited to hear your secrets, Sadaf. Thank you. And now to our fourth speaker, Mazen, a life purpose coach whose goal is to guide and support fellow humans on their journey towards creating and leading fulfilling lives. And as of this month, if I'm not mistaken, Mazen, I've heard that you're the co-founder of Mazhood Touch. Congratulations. Now, Mazen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to mental health?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. And it's my pleasure to be with the panelists talking about the mental health. Honestly, my background is human resource development. and I've been in the banking sector for almost 23 years, taking care of training section of the division. And my exposure to coaching was in 2015, where I found that it's really important at the personal level to have a purpose in life and values. And this helped me to be somehow grounded and see the value of how to be present, aware of what I'm doing in life. And then I started having this mindful conversation, a contribution, support to myself and to those people around me. And that's why what encouraged me to be in this conversation, because it's really gonna be insightful and contributing to the life of people who are gonna listen to us. So thank you.
Thank you, Mazen. And this is the purpose of this event, hopefully. It's like we want to create this mindfulness conversation towards this topic. And hopefully by the end of this, us, the panelists, and our audience would also feel that way. Now, thank you to each of our panelists for taking the time to introduce yourselves and sharing your backgrounds with us. It's great to have such a diverse and knowledgeable group of experts here today to discuss mental health and help raise awareness towards this issue. Now, I appreciate your commitment to this topic, and I look forward to learning more. And let's delve deeper into the discussion. But first, I would like to say that today's live talk is going to be a bit different from what we're used to seeing. We're going to start things off with a fun and interactive poll where you, our audience, can participate in a real-time conversation with us, while our panelists here will briefly share their opinions on each one of the questions that are in the poll, and there are 5 of them. So this interactive activity will help us share and break the ice and get a sense of everyone's aspects on the topic before we dive into a more in-depth, detailed discussion. So let's begin. First, we're going to share a code with you where our audience could scan the code. We're going to give them a few minutes to get settled with the code, and then we're going to start with the questions. And once we go from one question to the other, we're going to hear a brief response from each one of our panelists. So let's just wait a few minutes for our audience to get settled. I'll give them a few more seconds. It shouldn't take long. Okay, I think we can get started. So let's go to the questions. So the first question is, how are you feeling today? I could begin to break the ice during the first question. So I'm feeling great to be here and have the opportunity to speak with everyone. However, I must admit, this is a mindful and open conversation. So I gotta admit that it is a bit stressful for me now because of university finals and commitments. But I am excited to be here. We need this. Mazen, how are you feeling?
Frankly speaking, I would share some of your feelings, which is anxious. What let's say the conversation gonna be about. What contribution a valuable contribution I'm gonna share with the audience, because this is like, I have something to add value to people's life. That's back in the back end of my thinking, or my way of participating in such events.
Mhm. Thank you for your honesty, Sada.
I think at the moment, as we talk, I'm feeling excited. If you have asked me this question 15, 20 minutes before, when I was setting up my, phone and lights and everything, then it would be like maybe a bit anxious. But at this point of time, I'm super excited.
That's good. I'm happy to hear that. And Dr. Nahida?
To be very honest and transparent, physically I'm feeling exhausted, but mentally I'm feeling lit up. Exhausted because it's been a long week. I feel like I'm doing three full-time jobs, but at the same time, I love each role that I take up so immensely that I was telling my friend this afternoon, I don't feel burnt out. I feel lit up. So it's the purpose that this job brings me is very very gratifying, but my body doesn't agree all the time.
And this is an interesting thing you just mentioned. It's because sometimes we need to notice, like, when our body says we need to take the specific break. And perhaps we're going to mention some of it today during the talk. Thank you for sharing. And Dr. Diksha?
Right. So I had a minor freak out with my Wi-Fi just before we began. This always happens to me, hands down, no matter how much prep I do. So I'm the kind of person who likes to prepare. And as all of us at some point know that things don't go according to plan, right? So I was like, great, no issues today, calm and quiet environment, had a couple of Wi-Fi issues. So minor freak out at the beginning. The countdown, the 1 minute countdown didn't really help. I felt like, okay, I was going to begin a race as it was going on. But I think once we started right now, I guess I'm just curious. I'm curious to know how things will work out. I'm curious to learn from everyone. And yeah, just trying to be as mindful as in the moment as possible. So yeah.
So, from like, I want to just sum up what you just said. You went from being like very hectic with the Wi-Fi to like really like with the countdown. That is the purpose of the countdown, probably, to like put the nerve.
Absolutely. It just shows the complexity of human beings, the range of emotions that we can experience in a span of, say, 5 to 7 minutes, right? So, hey there, in the spirit of full honesty.
Well, we're excited to see how this goes as well. We're gonna fill up your curiosity as well. And now to the second question: mental health in one word. Mazen.
For me, I see it as presence.
We can hear you now.
You can hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, it's a presence.
Presence. And Sada?
One word will be experience.
Experience. Dr. Nahida?
Necessity.
And Dr. Diksha?
Perception.
Perception. Well, I think we have like some similarities in there. I think because some of you come from the same, like, you view mental health and some like similar aspects rather than others. And now to our third question. From a scale of 1 to 5, how often do you feel emotionally overwhelmed? Mazen?
Like 3.
3. And Sada?
3.
Nahida?
3 for me too.
Oh. And Dr. Diksha?
I'd say 3.5. I'm really going to sort of break the ice here and go a step ahead. I'd say sometimes 3.5.
3.5. Okay, that's interesting. So most of us do experience emotionally overwhelmed. And look at the answers, like they range from rarely to always. Wow, okay. And now do you try to improve your mental health? Since most of you said like 3.5. So do you do something to improve your mental health?
Of course, for me, it's like, a ongoing process of doing that. So it's not only one time and then I stop. No, it's continuous.
And what would you say that helped like you with keeping up with the continuous of improving your mental health?
My understanding that since I'm a human being, I develop, things change. And because of that, every stage of my life requires, a pause to think and to re-evaluate what I'm going through.
Mm-hmm.
That's why paying attention. That's why I said presence. As much I'm present in my moment in my life with my relationship with myself or even others, that requires a mental health awareness.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And it's like keeping yourself grounded. Like
Yep.
if I could, okay. And Sadaf, how like do you try to improve your mental health? And
Of
how is
course,
that?
yeah, it's like a never-ending process. I cannot say that there is one any word like a perfect mental health because it's a journey. It's it's ever changing. It's ongoing. Some days are amazing. Some days are like meh, and then we are just between this continuum where we are trying to find our true selves. What I do for my own mental health is I started very late, honestly, to tell you the truth, because I feel this is something that maybe a lot of people who are coming from collectivism society can relate to, is that setting boundaries. For my own mental health, I started creating healthy boundaries which would let me perform my best and won't harm anybody else around me.
Mm-hmm. And that's like a step of realization where most of us may not see or realize. Like you said, for you it was a bit late,
Yeah.
but you were able to acknowledge the fact that I need
Yeah.
in order to improve my mental health, and that's
Yeah.
important. And Dr. Nahida.
Um, for me, mental health and faith go hand in hand. So a lot of spirituality is what how I see my mental health as, and it's a constant process. Every day, it's like a new goal, and it's basically it boils down to being connected to self, connected to environment and people you love, connected to the nature. So there are days that I just want to be connected to nothing but fresh air and the trees and the sounds of the birds. There are days that I want to be surrounded by people, and there are days I just want to be alone with myself. So those three aspects of connectedness is basically what I think from my perspective mental health boils down to.
Yes, and that's important. Also, what you said is about like acknowledging also where you're at, like whether you want to be connected with people or by yourself, rather than forcing yourself to be connected with people when you feel like you want to be connected with your own self or by the trees. I love that. And Dr. Diksha.
Um, like I said, I've got many different definitions of mental health. I've had it change, ever since I started thinking about it. I think for me, mental health is something that I have to, and I say this, I use this word very consciously. I have to make a conscious, consistent effort to work on my mental health. Of course, it's got to do something with my profession because I don't want to go out there and quote unquote preach about mental health or share, hey, there's this and there's that, but never having tried it myself. So I think there is an element of absolutely trying to apply everything that I talk about. I think I like to call it my toolkit. There's a toolkit of strategies, and I sometimes kind of write it down because you could know everything, right? You could have access to all the latest research. You could meet wonderful people and learn from them. But in the moment, when you're having a hard time, not remember what to do. So I like having my toolkit, things to things that I fall back on. I think there are two main things, and this is quite related to what Dr. Nahida mentioned. One of them is self-care, and I do not mean self-care in terms of the buzzword that exists on social media nowadays. I think self-care is how you treat yourself when you are feeling the absolute worst about yourself. It's not tying self-care to rewards. I'll do this for myself if I accomplish this. So it's keeping those little nuances in mind, which are so difficult, but that's like one very key thing that I have started to fall back on in terms of my mental health. And the second thing is relationships. I think relationships with your family, with your friends, in your workplace, in any possible instance is super key to my mental health. So I tend to make sure that I'm in a good place with my relationships. My inner circle is very, very tight. So yeah.
I like the if, because I don't think I've ever heard the part of if in self-care. And as
Yeah.
you said, self-care now is being like mentioned like a buzzword everywhere. And I
It's quite
don't
conditional. It's being sold as a very conditional thing. You go and buy yourself something, you go for a spa day. I'm not saying, so everyone can have different definitions. Fair
Mhm.
enough. It's just something that I feel is I don't want to make it conditional. I don't want to, make it a buzzword. I want to be very consistent with what I think about my own self-care. So yeah.
Yes. And it's also important to mention that, as you said, this works for you, and it is how it is for you. It doesn't mean that it's going to work for each one of us. Everyone has a different journey.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. Thank you for sharing, and hopefully we'll dive deep into that as well. And now to our last question, which is, in your opinion, is stigma associated with mental health today? Is everyone thinking? Anyone? Dr. Diksha?
My mind straight went off to some of the clients that I work with, parents, families, children, young people, schools, so lots of educational institutions, schools and universities. I don't speak for everyone. I don't speak for all communities at all. I think we're in a much better place than where we were, say, a decade ago. Right? When I initially started working, when I was a student, things of psychology in itself was considered like a very, oh, what's the deal with it kind of thing. And now to having conversations like this where we're going out there, we're normalizing, talking about mental health, mental illness, well-being, whichever aspect of the continuum we're talking about. I think it's very much a factor in consideration. Absolutely. There are loads of misconceptions about mental health which still exist, which are propagated by social media. Let me put that out there. So we're getting better in so many different ways, but we've still got a while to go. I've given you a very roundabout answer, but that's the best I can do at this point.
I think the rest might have similar responses, but let's hear them. Mazen?
See, back again to the point, this is my understanding that mental health stigma to a certain area or certain not era or period of time, but not anymore now. Uh, who is making mental health to look like a stigma? I've seen, I don't know, it's like, if I can call it people or individual, for the sake to make it more commercial, for the sake of get at maybe clients, maybe buyers or whatever, but it's not anymore. I see it because of the awareness that mental health is really important and should raise the awareness around it. So there is, as I really like the word advocate for mental health, because people see the value of mental health, and it can be approached by everyone to raise his own awareness about the mental health. The only point is how people or individual is or are looking at the mental health. Are they afraid of it because of a culture thing or mis or distorted facts about mental health? And that's why it became stigma.
Yes. Yes. And we're gonna even dive deeper with what you said about like, oh, like the word itself and how like you think it's been, like the commercial aspect of it. And I think it's also kind of related to what Dr. Diksha said in the beginning, with also that's also could be related to like the misconceptions of or how people want to be heard. And hopefully we're gonna get into it because you guys are touching some of the discussion topics that we're gonna get into. And Dr. Nahida? What do you think?
From my perspective, having worked with people with mental illnesses, I don't think mental health is stigmatized. Mental illnesses are definitely stigmatized. I mean, like, how many of us are going to knowingly employ a person with bipolar, or marry a person with schizophrenia, or, give the same amount of respect that, we give normal people when it comes to somebody with a chronic mental illness. So I think I'm glad to see that there is a lot of conversation happening about preventive aspect of mental health, which is how do you care about your mental health, how do you promote it, awareness and campaigns and advocacy. Beautiful. But there are certain individuals, the mental health is part of their lives. They live with it on a day-to-day basis. And what are we doing about that? How much are we advocating for that? How much of inclusivity are we looking for when it comes to people with chronic disability? Because majority of the times when I see my patients, sometimes it's like, halas, they put on medications and now this is a life sentence, that they should be sedated and locked up or kept secluded. But that's not true. There is functional recovery that can happen. Maybe not 100%, but definitely there's room for these individuals in the community. And I think I'd like to see the conversation move in that direction, where we are providing rehabilitation, reintegration of these individuals without stigma, with dignity, with the benefit or the privileges we all get. So that would be ideal.
And I would like to ask a follow-up question based on, like, because you said like you have those patients who you do see like, oh, they could like grow from that, right? So what would you say, like, do you think that the stigma that's surrounding the mental illnesses rather than mental health affects their ability to overcome it?
Absolutely. I mean, employment is the simplest thing, or even education. How many of my patients would love to go get up in the morning and go get a job and, be productive and earn some money? It could be trivial, but they want to be productive. It again boils down to purpose, right? We all live for a purpose, and these individuals are living, breathing, healthy in most ways, and they want to be productive, part of the society that we live in. And when you don't give them employment, when you close your doors or educational institutes on them, when your relationships or psychosocial engagements with them are, cut down, obviously they will feel like they are not a part of the society, or they're not accepted as normal.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, and we could see that based on like what we've been reading on news. Like we've been hearing a lot of news of those like mental health illnesses stories about those who committed suicide, like young children as well. And I'm sure like here we have like some advocates for children and young adults. We should like we can see like how the stigma that's associated with mental illnesses can affect their own ability to overcome it. And I would like to hear the Sadaf's point of view regarding stigma.
I've got a good news and a bad news. Which one would you like to hear first?
Let's go from bad to good.
Okay. Bad news is that we have a long way to go. Our emotional and felt experiences are not acknowledged actually all the time. As soon as we become a teenager, we are, told that maybe whatever we are saying is not making sense, and then this habit of not expressing ourselves, not sharing our true experience, just becomes part of us. The emotions that come and go are just a message. We don't have to attach too many things to it, but unfortunately, since we are not trained to handle our emotion, we try to associate everything with whatever is going inside us. And having said that, when it gets too much, then we just break down. So acknowledging regularly our thoughts, our emotion, and aligning them to ourselves, our value, is very important, and it's a continuous thing. And it's just a beautiful experience. When I say mental health is an experience, I mean a beautiful experience, because when you go beyond that point where you can acknowledge and express yourselves, you get into a world which is like amazing for you. So that's the challenge. The bad news. Good news is that our generation is the first one to talk about this, and this cannot stop here. The more we acknowledge this, the more discussion we have, the more things we put into practice will just add more and more value to our generation. Yani, whatever task we need to do, and the generation who's coming up, things will be like, I'm very positive, I'm very hopeful, things will become better for them. But the thing is, at this point of time, if we can just acknowledge the emotional and the felt experience, things can be better for us and the people around us.
Yes. Okay, so I gotta say, like, you did say that this is the start point of it, and we can't go back from here. Like, since now
Yeah.
this is the first generation that's got their hands on it and they're like acknowledging this fact, then we gotta keep pushing into it. Like, make
Yeah.
not like forcing it on people, but rather than bringing their awareness into it in order to make it
Yeah,
no.
like it's a big win, I would say, for this generation, that at least, we are talking about it, we are positive about it, we have point of view on this.
Mhm. Yes, and I'm gonna relate that to what you said in the beginning, which is it's gonna take us a long while.
A bit, yeah.
So, like
But
with where
finger
we
crossed,
are,
we are hopeful, yeah.
yeah, we are hopeful, especially with what you said, the generation that we are in now, like those who are actually, making this conversation happen.
Yeah.
So, and so, like, okay, let's relate it to social media. What was Mazen was saying? He said, like, okay, social media is a big part of, like, oh, putting, was it Mazen, or am I getting, okay, it was Dr. Diksha. Dr. Diksha, she's the one who said about the how social media puts this like effect of the stigma out there, and at the same time we could say it also that this is where mental health is being, like, shown as awareness through social media as well. Like, I don't think, like, nowadays when you open your social media you would find a lot of topics related to mental health more than how you would before. But at the same time, people are still sharing the stigma, like, those, I don't want to say hated, like those people who may not believe in the aspect of mental health, but like it is still out there, and like it's delivered through social media as well. Okay, now we're not done with the poll, but we're gonna have it for our audience. We're gonna get back to it towards the end of the conversation. Now, I want to go into what you've mentioned throughout the stigma topic. Now, we did say that, and with the stigma that's associated with mental health, that there are common misconceptions about mental health. So my question is, how can we dispel them? How can we dispel those misconceptions?
Who do you want to go first?
Would you like to go first, Dr. Naida?
Um, so I think, I mean, one of the things that I have learned through practice and experience in dispelling the stigma itself is having spokesperson from the community of mentally ill. So when you give them a platform to talk about and you make them realize that they are empowered, that they are heard, it really proliferates the sense of, identification, and others who are suffering but who would have kept, let's say, hush about their illnesses, or not having come forward about their illnesses, are now coming forward because they saw this one champion coming out and saying, I have mental illness and I'm this productive and I've done this and so and so. So I think creating more safe platforms and safe spaces for people to come out and say, yes, I have mental illness, but I'm also an engineer, and I'm also a homemaker, or I'm also a person in a relationship, and I'm doing all of that together. So that really empowers people. So I think the strategy I would adapt if I were to in order to dispel the stigma is give more empowerment and platforms and safe spaces for people with mental illness to talk.
Yes. And about you said, um, you did say that the like the how the like the misconceptions, in order to dispel them, do you think that the putting or emphasizing awareness through it, because I'm trying to relate it to the question that we got throughout the comments. There's a question that promoting raising awareness through societies, and I think it's related to the stigma that's surrounding us, because in cultures, and like in some cultures mental health is highly stigmatized or less stigmatized. So I want to know, with like what you said about the misconceptions, like through, like, yeah, this is the question. So through the cultures, or like through the awareness, can the misconceptions be dispelled rather than the mental illness, like, because it's mental health and mental health stigma, and then goes to the misconceptions. Okay, so we can dispel this. How do we dispel that? Because one thing leads to the next, right?
So I think people working in the field would relate to this, and they would have seen ample examples too. Coming down to that society and the culture, then the conceptions that we live in, the perceptions, uh, you again come if you were to have people from that background who have had dwelt in the past with a certain misconception and have seen, have navigated, and taken treatment or gone through the channels to get better, when they come out and say, yes, I used to have this problem, but not anymore because I'm in treatment now and there is hope and there is better in, or I'm getting better. I think mental illnesses in the end of the day are illnesses like anything else. So like how in the beginning of times we had to promote for vaccinations or diabetes or, cardiovascular health, people with these illnesses or these conditions come out and say, I practice so and I'm better now. And I think that's exact route we have to take in mental illness. For example, I can talk about dementia. That's the simplest thing, which is not as stigmatized as the others, but people have realized, once their parents and their grandparents start taking treatment early ahead of time, and then they start addressing the behavioral issues or the anxiety that comes with the onset of dementia, when they address it and they have now become a new person, and these people are in a good place to go and say, hey, dementia does happen, and it doesn't mean you've gone cuckoo or you're less, of any less because you have this disability or whatnot. And those people can come forward and advocate for the others who are otherwise, having second thoughts about taking their parents to a shrink, because that's such a demeaning thing in our culture, to see a psychiatrist. That means the first thing they say is like, I'm not crazy. Invariably, no matter whom you suggest, you need to see a psychiatrist or a doctor. They're like, I'm not crazy. So, but people who have gone through that, the road of psychiatrists and taken treatment, they are in the best position to come out and say, I used to have that conception, and now here I am getting better, or my parents or my family members gotten better. So I think that's the safest and the easiest route.
Hmm.
Can I add something to that if we have the time?
Yes, we have the time. Go ahead.
Um, Excellent question. And I literally want to jump on to what Dr. Nahida said and think about early intervention, and not
Mhm.
in the sense of actual intervention, in the sense of raising awareness. We need to talk about mental health, disabilities, inclusion in general at schools, starting
Mhm.
from the earliest years, right? You become adults, and this is something new that you've got to come to terms with. You go into employment and you see someone who's struggling, with a mental illness or, any form of disability. It's new to you. We're not conditioned right now. Not a lot of us have had the experience or the understanding or just open conversations around diversity and inclusion. And I'm just going to label it as that. The moment we start having those conversations early on through the early years, so primary, middle, high school, university, we become more inclusive as a community. We don't need to point out, oh, this person has this difficulty, this person has this difficulty, this is how we support them. Not necessarily. Just the idea of diversity, neurodiversity, mental health, everyone having different periods when they find life a little bit difficult. What can you do? The moment we start having those conversations early on, the more normalized they become across different cultures, across different curriculums, people from different communities speaking up. And I think that's a very, very key thing that needs to be included in educational curriculums as we move forward.
Yes, I did think of that like throughout my journey of researching mental health. And I gotta agree, like it has to start from the beginning. Like I don't know if you've seen, like in kindergarten how they ask kids, how are you feeling? And they
Yeah,
color in the faces. And then it suddenly stops the second they go into first grade. But
exactly.
why does it stop? Because we still have feelings and we still could have bad days.
It absolutely. Why does it stop? It's because these at some points these questions, for the lack of a better word right now, are considered wishy-washy, right, in the early stages.
Mhm.
However, awareness, so cognitively, children tend to develop as the years go on. We have to become more and more aware. The language, I think language is such a key aspect of mental health, mental illness, mental well-being, right? The kind of language that we use around emotions has to progress, become more complex as the years go on, I think.
And I have follow-up questions. Anyone could like go ahead and join as well. But like, what do you think that there like we can create this culture of support in schools or in workplaces, like to ensure that okay, like mental wellness is a challenge?
Can I add few points for workplace, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we are at workplace and we want to address this issue, the best idea is to ask employees to come up with their own definition of mental health and ask them to visualize what mental health is for them. Like for example, if I ask this question to audience right now, that imagine World Mental Health, what comes into your mind? You can take a few seconds. Some people might say we see an anxious person. Some people might say we see a person in a group talking about it. Somebody can say that I see an asylum. Somebody can see that I can see mental health as taking care of myself. And all of these definitions are just experiences. All these images are just experiences. There is nothing right and wrong in it. But what happens is that when we give a platform to our employees to talk about this topic, what people do is that different viewpoints and different opinion comes in, and then we just open a room for diversity, connection, communication, and then that can be the starting point for any organization to want their employees to work on mental health, and then from there they can take it forward, first to apply it on themselves, like the managers, the leaders, like they say put oxygen mask on your face first, so they tell storytelling, experiences of their own in a safe place when they are ready and how much they want to share, they have a choice, and then transfer that energy to their employees, where their people also can, they feel safe that yes. And then when we talk about employees, manager, it doesn't have to be the direct boss they have to talk to. It doesn't have to be the person sitting next to their cabin. It can be any person on any level in the organization. And I have a feeling everybody knows somebody that that they can feel safe about talking about this topic. So maybe that can be the starting point for organizations.
Yes, and I would like to add, like, I don't know, something like I grasped from what you were saying and it stuck to me. Like, when we put up this, like, oh, mental, like, we do these mental health side stuff. Like, why isn't it, why don't we include it in a regular thing? Like, why should it be something on a side? Or why isn't a regular, normal thing in our lives that, oh, we need to do this in order to work efficiently, in order to study efficiently, in order to make sure we're leading our lives.
Yeah. I think in companies, in organization, during COVID time, this mental health trainings and talks and seminars just boosted like anything. So I believe that COVID is all good for a wrong reason. Many goodness happened, but the reason wasn't maybe, too good. So many things they evolve actually during COVID time, and people and organizations are talking about mental health. But yes, maybe, just a few steps forward to make it as normal as, what lunch you had today, how was your day, or the project about the project, because mental health is as real as the sky is blue, and it is as going as our last breath.
But as you said, it is a long journey. Like, in order to make it
Yeah.
like a normal conversation, like, oh, how's your day? we need
Yeah.
it needs time. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the COVID, the
Yes.
pandemic, and
Yeah.
it did bring new challenges to mental health, and I think that's where people started to be more aware of mental health, because after COVID, that's when people started realizing that mental health is an issue, and more people started experiencing those
Yeah.
personal issues, personal, where they thought of actually getting the help that they needed from the pandemic.
True.
So, and I have a question. Do you all believe that those virtual services of mental health can support and like individuals, and like can it go beyond that? Like the telehealth aspect of caring for your mental health.
If you want me to go for that, uh, So workplace mental health has been a huge topic, and as Sadaf mentioned, it is a a result of the pandemic bringing a lot of precipitating a lot of mental health issues. But the fundamental problem why people in a workplace get burnt out or get even have those mental health anxiety or stress related issues is because we're seeing a rise in incivility, and that had nothing to do with the pandemic. People are so rude to each other. People are so it's a cutthroat society there. So as long as we're not focusing on redoing some of human behavior, we will be having a backlash of mental health. A lot of people precipitating into anxiety and trouble sleeping because they're so scared of showing up at work next day, or trouble coping with the tasks that they've assigned. People could go into their dream job and then they burn out within no time because of the atmosphere they're going to. So I also see a lot of work being done in workplace in terms of leadership, how they should be mentally empowering. But I think, I mean, tagging it to one leader or let's say one entity and their HR is not the solution. We need, as a society, to understand that human beings are made to be more connected to each other in a more, cordial ways. Basically, I think it just goes back to teaching people humanity, how to be civil to each other, how to be decent to each other, to be thankful when somebody does something nice to you, to say please and excuse me, or when mean it when you say how you doing, like you actually want to help if they're not doing well. So that's my 2 cents. So I think that mental health problems will be on a rise until and unless we don't address human incivility, be it social media, be it a virtual platform, be it in a workplace, or be it within a family. People have forgotten how to be nice to each other.
Yes. Do you want to say something, Dr. Diksha?
I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Very typical,
Yes.
isn't it? I think the hustle culture is a huge factor that has contributed to mental health difficulties during COVID, post COVID. I think we were heading towards a mental health crisis. COVID may have precipitated that. The fact that we want everything to happen right here, right now, right? If a text comes through, we've got to respond. We've got to leave everything and we've got to respond to it immediately. The expectation that emails have to be answered within the span of 6 hours, right? The expectation that everything has to take place here and now. Our attention span as human beings has significantly reduced in the past couple of years. And obviously bringing in social media, I'm not kind of coming across as someone who hates social media, I don't. But just in general, the adrenaline has gone up, the dopamine, we're constantly craving validation from outside. We're not as grounded, we're not as mindful, and that could be one of the reasons why we're finding it a little bit hard to concentrate at work, where deadlines are really, really getting to us. And I definitely think that's something to consider moving on from here and now is, what are we doing as organizations? What's the culture like? What's the feel like? Obviously, it starts right from the top going into the bottom. What are we doing to combat the hustle culture? Because that is having a direct impact on attention and productivity.
I have to add one thing which is really attract my attention when Dr. Nahida was saying in the beginning of the conversation and really touched my attention, which is the dignity. When the moment she said dignity, immediately I was saying, okay, are we accepting and appreciating the human nature and the human being of us, the whole being? Why I'm saying this? Because if I'm accepting the human fellow who's like whoever is that guy, my colleague at work, for example that Sadaf was talking about, I will accept his voice, accept his being, accept what he's going through, and then I might be helping him. Like back to the point of how to promote in society. If we don't lead by example, we will not be promoting the mental health in societies. And how we promote, we have to, as been said, a platform, events, everything. People should be feel the freedom of saying without being afraid of saying that okay they have challenge or they have going through a difficult time, for example. Uh, Back to the point that Dr. Diksha was talking about the information, I feel the urgency of the world outside me became pressurizing me more to fulfill that urgency, which might not be my urgent, and that will create a huge pressure on the human being. Or if I'm talking about myself, it's pressurizing me. Like when you said about my business, just I'm launching my business. One of the things, okay, I have to follow the trend. What is trend in the market? How to promote myself? All of this create a pressure. Is it a pressure that I like? No, I don't like, but as much I'm aware that it's a pressure, I reduce the impact on myself, and that's really somehow will help my mental health to be at a reasonable level. Let's say if I can call it like this. Okay, so Dr. Diksha was talking about the information, which I came across a definition of a word called info obesity. So apparently, obesity is not has to do with weight only; it has to do with so many things, and that's why there are a lot of information we receive. We have to be aware: is it important to me, healthy to me, or not? That's also what contribute to the mental health and run.
Yes, you brought up an interesting point, Mazen. It's also about, I feel like most of us, or humans in general, feel like they need to conform to something. More, everyone's doing this. Oh, I want to do this, even though I'm not comfortable to me, even though it doesn't seem to be healthy to me, or I'm not in the right position and the right time for me to do this. Yet people still feel forced and pressured to conform into being a part of this as well. And hopefully with the awareness of mental health and taking care of your own mental health, having your own journey could help them, get them out of this situation, and rather be able to acknowledge the fact that, oh, it's not their time, it's not their position, and maybe sometime later, after they care for their own self, that's when they could perhaps do that as well. And since we're almost ending, like we have a few more minutes, I want to ask you like a final question, which is like, how can we, like, let's talk about our loved ones, or those who need the support. How can we support them, or like what can we say to them? What is the message that we could say to them, and to anyone who's listening? Maybe they may be struggling, so what message can we share with them with mental health challenges? How can we make sure that they're heard, that we're there for them, and that we could create this community of support, whether it's with us or with their organization, within their own aspects of lives?
You're speaking with the
Sorry,
phone.
my mic is muted.
Yes.
Yeah, so I can carry on. I can continue. Yeah, okay. So I think if we talk about loved one, because when we are in a position where we are to give help to somebody, when we talk about mental health discussion, it depends who we are talking to. If it's our kid, it will be different. If it's our friend, it will be different. If it's an employee, it will be different. Okay, so I'll talk about the people, like you said, who are loved ones or our friends. When we talk to them about mental health, I think the first thing that we should do is keep our judgment aside. We need to show them that we care. Sometimes just a WhatsApp message, from a friend asking us, how are we feeling today? Or, we hear this about you got hurt, ABCD, how is it now? Just this simple text message, can make somebody's day. So if we are talking about somebody like friend, anybody, we need to keep our judgment aside. We have to express that we care and we love. And I think when I do this counseling and coaching with my team, employees, or the people who work with me on their mental health, I just make sure that I work on three things. Number one, communication, storytelling, and empathy. When we have these three connections right aligned, then I think everybody gets comfortable and they feel kind of safe in this space to talk about, because we are having an open communication, we are talking in terms of storytelling, and then when people are sharing their stories, we don't end up telling our stories. Like, for example, somebody says that, oh, I went there, this happened to me. No, 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 you wait. You know what happened to me? I'll tell you my story. So we have to make sure that when we are there, we are communicating, we are actually there for them, not for us.
Yes. Anyone else with their point of view of supporting loved ones?
Um, I can dive in. So, along the same lines as what Sadaf was mentioning, I think it's very important to make a person feel safe. And I like to convey this message with a story that I always, in different platforms and even different groups of audiences, last one being fifth graders, the way they understood this best. So, when I was a little girl, I used to go to the beach, and the waves were very scary because I was this big and the waves were this tall. I would come running out, and my dad would bring me back holding hand and say, I'm here, I'm holding your hand, don't worry, nothing's going to happen. So, and I reflect on that moment so many times because the waves didn't change, my height didn't grow, but just holding dad's hand made me feel safe, made me feel like someone's got my back, nothing's going to happen. And that's what we need to provide, be it loved ones, be it your team members, be it your patients, giving that safe space, saying, I'm here if I've got your back. So, and I think that's that, and again, neurobiologically, that increases oxytocin in you. So if I'm sure everybody is very much aware of cortisol, with a very infamous hormone that increases stress and makes us really anxious and insomniacs, and makes our immunity go down. So working right opposite to that is oxytocin, that makes us feel bonded, makes us feel safe, makes us feel relaxed, and helps us grow. So basically, creating that atmosphere, whoever you are dealing with, who's got a challenge, be it a child or a friend or a acquaintance, making them know that they're in a safe space, they can speak up, and you're there to help. That's how we build mental health for others.
That was very heart touching, the story of bonding. And I feel like most of us could relate to it in different, their own situations of bonding with their own, parents, children, friends. Anyone would like to?
Yeah,
I want to
Mazen,
share.
you can go ahead.
Sure, sorry, doctor.
Go ahead. It's absolutely fine.
I believe in one. Thank you, doctor. I believe in one thing, which is as a human, that we are the light of God on earth. And that means that, back to the point of purpose, it means there's a purpose of being on this earth, that we want to deliver it back to the world. And this is what I'm trying to let my kids even understand this. Even talking with people, believe you have something. Maybe you don't know it now, but you will know it later. If this is the foundation of any human being, he will be strong enough to know how to face whatever challenge he's facing or she's facing. That's what I feel. And that's based on my experience. From aimless to purposefulness is the goal or the aim.
Thank you, Mazen. Dr.
Right.
Nixon.
I'll be very quick. Couple of things that I've personally found useful when trying to be there for loved ones. And that is, number one, being very mindful of the language that you use when you're talking to someone whom you think may be struggling. So rather than outright labeling them as, oh, you seem depressed or you're anxious, I think these terms are just thrown around like candy nowadays, right? What happened to just being worried or fearful or sad? Let's actually call it what it is, rather than labeling. That's point one. Another thing that is quite useful is, often, and this is me being outside a psychologist, right? Me just being there for someone as a friend or a family member, whatever, is it's an innate human tendency to go like, oh, I need to give suggestions to this person. I need to help them out. What if they want someone to just listen to them? Right? So I think you need to ask them and yourself, do you just want me to be a listener right now? Or do you want me to offer suggestions? That can make a huge difference, because sometimes someone just wants to vent and sometimes they actually need advice. So you need to like really ground yourself in, rather than, oh yeah, I've got to say this. I tried this. Have you tried this? Have you tried this? Like, don't bombard someone who's struggling with all your the best of intentions, but just hang in there. And also look out for yourself. I think compassion fatigue is what we call it in the literature, but it's very easy to get overwhelmed with hearing a lot of the things that people bring to you at work, in your personal life, in whatever. And that's not the point. You can't save someone from drowning if you're drowning yourself, right? So you got to be a little bit mindful of that. And that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Diksha. As we're coming to an end, and I really enjoyed, and like each one of us had like those deep insights, especially towards the end with supporting loved ones. We all had these own personal stories related to our own lives. Thank you. So to conclude, as we come to the end of our live talk session on Mental Health Awareness Month, I want to take a moment to reflect on the important insights and ideas that we have shared today with our panelists. We've heard about various ways of which mental health can impact our lives and communities, from workplace to schools to families and even our relationships. We've also discussed many challenges and stigma associated with mental health, but also the ways that we can improve our own mental health and support those who are struggling. I want to express my deepest thanks to our panelists for their thoughtful and insightful contributions to this conversation. Your expertise and personal experience have shed light on important issues and helped to foster a greater understanding and awareness of mental health. I also want to thank our audience for joining us today and engaging with us on this important dialogue. Your questions, comments, and feedback have indeed enriched this conversation. In closing, I want to emphasize the importance of continuing this dialogue, this mindfulness conversation beyond this live talk session. Mental health challenges affect us all, regardless of age, gender, background, or identity. It is up to all of us to embrace mental health awareness and support in our community, workplaces, and homes. We must break down the barriers of stigma and shame that often prevent individuals from seeking the help and the support they need, and instead let's create this safe space, as our speakers have said, this inclusive spaces where mental health can be discussed openly and without judgment. Thank you again to our panelists and audience for being part of this important conversation today, and I hope each one of us have a good evening tonight. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.